Hi, welcome to the fourth video of the rules of acquisition. In this video, I'm going to show you that in order to fix science, we really only need to look in the mirror. Because what I'm going to demonstrate to you in this video is that humans are the worst thing to happen to science. Let's begin this by looking back in the 1500s, where there was about 1.5 billion people on the earth. And only one person had the right stuff, the right education, the right genius, the right self-confidence, the right resources, the right economic conditions, and the right position within the society that he could do what he had to do. And what he did is to demonstrate that the earth was not the center of the universe. And this demonstration was against what all the leading experts believed. And how did the leading experts of the time treat this guy? And this guy's name was Galileo. And how did they treat him? Well, he faced significant opposition from the Catholic Church. He was vehemently suspected of heresy and sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his life. Now, at this day and age, the Catholic Church was the arbiters of the truth. They decided what was right and what was wrong. And anything that would threaten their preeminence, their primacy, their credibility, that would threaten their power and influence in society. And they wanted to protect that. And this guy needed to be put away. This little punk telling them that they're all wrong. It wasn't about the truth. It was about protecting their power. Okay, and they can't have somebody contradicting them, because then people would start to believe that they are not the preeminent source of truth on the planet. And they will lose that influence and power. And that's what everything is about, is either money or power. And now, I'm not really against those things as long as the average person understands all of this. That basically eliminates their power and influence. And that's education is the most important thing here. Okay, if we go to Wikipedia, you can read the rest of these on your own. Galileo complained that some of the philosophers who opposed his discoveries had refused even to look through a telescope. Same problem everybody has when you contradict the leading experts. Okay, this is Distinti's Rules of Scientific Acquisition version 5, or Rules of Acquisition for short. This is my effigy of the truth, which is justice as an avenging angel, and these spheres with equations in them represent humans' attempt at mathematical models to describe nature. And nature is over here, Mother Nature. This used to be my effigy for Mother Nature, but I want to keep this for Distinti.com and make this the effigy of Mother Nature for ethereal mechanics. Now, I didn't ask AI to produce her nude. AI did that on their own. All I requested is that she have a long neck and short hair, which I find very regal, very simple, very practical. Something Mother Nature must have. The nudity, okay, that works for me, because Mother Nature should have nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of. And nature is beautiful, whether you look at mountains or sunsets or forests, whatever. Okay, these spheres with the equations, again, they represent mankind's attempt to model Mother Nature, to describe her mathematically. And the way AI did this, like she's inspecting one of them, that was completely AI's choice, and I love it because it looks like Mother Nature's amusing herself with our failing attempts to try to describe her mathematically. So I love this picture. I hope I don't get censored, because it's just a drawing. It's not a real live picture of anybody. So that's going to be the logo for Ethereal Mechanics effigy of Mother Nature. So in this fourth video, we're going to look at the problem of human behavior, common human traits like, jealousy and protecting power and cattle theory, mob theory, whatever you want to talk about. And I'm going to show how these impact science negatively. Okay. And we're going to do the 37th rule of acquisition, which is a leading expert fallacy. Rule of acquisition 7, which is a popularity fallacy. 27 is smarter monkey fallacy. 28 is the investment trap. And 30 is the enchantment trap. These are all traps. These are all human mind blocks that prevent us from doing progress in science. So what did we learn from the Galileo example? Well, we learned that scientific progress results from proving the leading experts wrong, at least to everyone else, because the leading experts will never admit that they're wrong. And this is why we need better education of the masses of science. Because if the leading experts hold sway over what the people believe, we're going to get nowhere. We need the average person to know. And this is one of the reasons for the rules of acquisition, is to educate as many people as possible on what the flaws are in science and how to improve those flaws. And getting everybody educated on science correctly is very important to making progress, because then the leading experts can't just push us around like chess pieces on a chessboard. We're not pawns. And again, the leading experts will oppose anything that threatens their primacy, their authority, their prestige, their credibility, their funding, their position, etc. And leading experts rarely admit being wrong in public. The only person I know that actually made a retraction, and I give him a lot of credit for that, was Stephen Hawking, when he found a mistake in one of his publications and he retracted. I've not seen anybody else, at least of his level, doing that. Okay, until we have a theory of everything, we should suspect that leading experts are wrong about everything. And scientific progress through falsification of widely held beliefs does not come from leading experts. Okay, leading experts start their life as one of the 1 in a billion people, and then they become a leading expert, and then after they become a leading expert, they seem to do everything to hold on to their past glory and stand in the way of further progress. Everybody who becomes a leading expert seems to do this, with the exception of a rare few. And scientific progress comes from the 1 in a billion person who's usually not a leading expert. Sometimes it happens, but they're usually an outsider that isn't indoctrinated, that isn't under the rule, isn't under the authority and the influence of the leading experts to shut up and do what you're told. And again, don't confuse technological progress with scientific progress. These are two totally different things. Those are explained in the previous videos. So let's do another example. Let's go look at the population of the Earth circa 1900. In circa 1900, there was about 1.6 billion people on the Earth. And what did the leading experts say about heavier than air flight? Well, let's go to the preeminent leading expert is Lord Kelvin, the British mathematician and physicist, president of the British Royal Society. He was the rock star of physics of his day. And his quote in 1895 was, "Heavier than air flying machines are impossible." Now this I find weird because British people tend to be bird lovers and bird watchers. Doesn't Lord Kelvin have a window on his cell that they keep him in? Doesn't he see that birds are doing it? Okay, and the New York Times said in October 1903 that it would take 1 to 10 million years for humanity to develop operable flying machine. Okay, and just 69 days later, the Wright brothers flew a Kitty Hawk, demonstrating the world's first heavier-than-air flying machine, and that it was possible. And guess what? They studied birds to come up with a lot of their ideas of how the shape of the wings should be. Great. I guess they had a window on their workshop and they could see outside, I guess. I don't know. Okay, Wilbur and Orville Wright are now the leading experts. And guess what? They did not go to college. They were outsiders. And again, they were the 1 in a billion. You got two people out of a planet of 1.6 billion. Now, I believe that one of the two, I forgot which one's which, one of them was the actual genius. The other one was the guy that did the business, took care of the business, took care of the finances, took care of arranging things and getting the resources for the other brother. Okay, I believe that's what the case was. But it doesn't matter. One couldn't have done it without the other. Both were needed to get the job done. I wish I had somebody to help me in this because there is so much to be done. The actual science is only about 10 or 15% of all the other bullshit I got to take care of on a daily basis. So if you want to help out, become a Patreon member. And I can start hiring people and or doing this full time. But what happened when they became the leading experts? Well, they end up spending a majority of their time in court defending their patents. Now, their patents were only valid in the United States, so basically what they did is they shut down aeronautical development in the United States for the next years that their patents were in force. And then when it came time for World War I, where the Europeans were not under U.S. patent rules, the Europeans went bonkers developing all kinds of very advanced airplanes. And these are all the airplanes used in World War I, and not one of them comes from the United States. Matter of fact, when the United States entered the war, they had to contract to build one of these for their Army Air Force. Okay, the Wright Flyer was more primitive than this guy up here. Then that was the only thing the U.S. Army had at the time, because the Wright brothers had the patent on flight, so you could only deal with them. Hey, Thomas Edison, same thing. He became the leading expert on movies, and he developed his kinetoscope in 1890 and demonstrated. Everyone went crazy. There was a lot of contingency of people that wanted to make a version of this for projection to audiences, what we now call the motion picture industry. But when they approached Edison, he vehemently told them, "Oh, that's ridiculous. That won't work. That's a bad idea. I will not license my invention to you." I don't know why he wouldn't let them try. I mean, they're going to pay him royalties, right? So what did they do? Well, they ended up moving to California to avoid Thomas Edison's patent enforcement. And that's why Hollywood was located in California. Now, I'm in favor of the patent system, and I'm in favor of giving total rights to the inventors, because that's the incentive you give to inventors to invest the time and the effort, because 9 out of 10 patents do not produce anything of value. Okay, and they need people to have an incentive to even try. And you can see this jerk over here that invented the multi-core processor, and who it was sold to is here. But of course, when I had this patent, I did not understand what Intel was going to use it for. I had a totally different understanding of what this could be used for. And if I knew what Intel was going to do with it, I would have asked for a lot more money. But you live and learn. You got to do your homework and not be closed-minded about what your invention can do and be used for. Because had the Wright brothers licensed it to other American manufacturers, we probably would have had airplanes equally good to those as the Europeans at the beginning of World War I. Had Edison licensed it, we probably would have had more than just Hollywood producing movies and had a much more vibrant thing going on. There's lots of other examples I can show you where if the stupid inventor just licensed it, it would have opened up other things that would have been more wonderful than just holding on to a few dollars of royalties. Just like this. Intel took this in a way I didn't understand how it would go, and it is fantastic. So I'm all for the patent system, but I'm also for inventors not being closed-minded about how their invention may be expanded to things they had no understanding of. Okay, I have firsthand experience of being closed-minded. I admit that. And so I try to be more open-minded about things and about licenses. Okay, then we go on to solar wind. This guy, Eugene Parker, came up with the idea of the solar wind. He was an outsider, I understand. Okay, he was not in the field of those people, and so they basically poo-pooed him. Now they named the Parker Solar Astronomy Probe after this guy. But his explanation was that they treated him poorly. They actually blacklisted him. Okay, same thing with the guy who came up with plate tectonics. Same thing with the guy that came up that the asteroids killed all the dinosaurs. They really laughed at that guy for his theory. There's example after example after example of coming up with new ideas that are basically blasted by the leading experts and actually ruining the livelihood of the people that come up with the ideas. Matter of fact, when I proposed my new model of induction to a physicist, he said, you'll never work in this field again. When I tried to use my new model of induction for my graduate thesis, I was told, you're not going to be allowed to graduate because this goes against the credibility of the university. Essentially, not necessarily in those words, but that was what I was basically told in no uncertain terms. So it's the leading experts that stagnate science. And this also is commented here by Max Planck. A new scientific truth, now he calls it a truth, Remember, we can never know the truth, but a new scientific idea, let's say it that way, does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. Okay, so this has been a problem in science that even scientists admit to. Okay, so we come to the 37th rule of acquisition, the leading expert fallacy. Progress results from proving leading experts wrong, at least to everybody else, because they're never going to admit that they're wrong, or waiting for them to die. And leading experts are wrong about everything, otherwise we would have a theory of everything by now. Now, I'm not saying leading experts have their purpose, but leading experts need to be more judicial about how they treat science. They need to be more open-minded that, they're only the leading expert until something else comes along. Okay, and so leading experts should be viewed as a hindrance to progress, even by the leading expert. If we do that, that would be a great awakening. Children need to be trained in science this way from the beginning, so when they become a leading expert, they'll know that there's a time that they should stand aside, or at the very least, see a really good idea from somebody that's an outsider that's struggling and try to promote it and get it pushed along. Use their position to better humanity, not to line their own pockets. And again, don't confuse technological progress with scientific progress. Now we're going to talk about the 7th rule of acquisition. Popularity is not proof. Okay, just because something is popular doesn't mean it's true or that it's right. Because if popularity were proof, we would still believe that the earth is flat, because that was a very popular idea. And the person that came across the idea that the earth was flat was one of those 1 in a billion people. So obviously we're not going to listen to him because he's just one of billions. So no need, if popularity is the litmus of truth, well, we can't listen to him or her. If popularity were proof, we would still be burning witches at the stake for witchcraft. If popularity were proof, we'd still believe the earth is the center of the universe. If popularity were proof, we would still believe that leading experts have any value in scientific progress. Okay, so if popularity were proof, we would already know what the truth is because a majority would decide what the truth is. Basically, mob rule. And the contributions from the 1 in a billion person would be ignored forever. This, my friends, is extinction-level stupidity. And there are many widely held beliefs that are inhibiting progress to this day, and we'll show them as the rules of acquisition videos go along. Now we're going to get into the smarter monkey fallacy. This is rule of acquisition 27, which basically states that the beliefs that someone should have said something by now is the reason no one says anything ever. So when I describe to people how broken things are, this is the usual reply I get. Well, if that were true, someone would have said something by now. Now, there are 3 implied dimensions to this response. One is, who are they? Okay, someone, they. Who are they that should have said something by now? Okay, who or what is compelling them to come forward? So you're saying they're obliged to come forward if they see something. If you see something, say something. What is their compellation to come forward? And finally, there's an implied statute of limitations, by now. Well, we're going to answer these in reverse order. So the implied statute of limitations is an easy one. All you have to do is go back to the Archimedes principle example, and that it took 2,000 years after Archimedes' principle was published before the technological footprint of humanity expanded to the point where ship's propulsion could go fast enough that the counterexample was uncovered. The condition known as squatting, as ships move quickly through the water, their buoyancy goes down and they sink lower in the water. Okay, so there is no statute of limitation when a theory can be proven false. In fact, this is one of the reasons for the rules of acquisition to come up with tells to show us before we have a counterexample where people may die and property damage, so that we can understand that in the minute that the theory or a model is developed, we can know if it is going to be part of a theory of anything or not. Okay, next we're going to talk about what is the compelling, the compulsion. And the answer is there's no compulsion or incentives for everyone to come forward. Okay, there are more incentives to shut the flock up. Okay, let's look at those incentives to shut the flock up. Because if you believe, because you're going to believe if you're working in your scientific laboratory and you find a counterexample to something like relativity or Maxwell's equations or whatever, and you're an insider, so in other words, you're under the thumb of the rest of the people that you are a colleague of, okay, you're going to say to yourself, well, I can't be the first to see this counterexample. Someone would have already come forward, and you're going to look desperately for a mistake. And you're going to use any anomaly as an excuse not to come forward because, hey, why am I going to take the heat for this? Okay, even after checking everything, you will still not publish because if an error is found by a smarter monkey, your credibility is going to be shot because probability is you're not the smartest person out there. And probably you have missed something that a smarter monkey would have found. Okay, and so you do not want to look bad to the smarter monkey because you're going to lose all your credibility. And finally, if you do publish, your leading experts are going to focus on any anomaly to discredit you and maintain their primacy. They're going to pick every single thing up. Oh, you didn't put a period at the end of that sentence. That shows sloppy. If you can't even bother to put a period at the end of a sentence, how can we know the rest of this was done correctly? They're going to throw you under the bus for any single little thing. It's not really even worth your time to publish it because this is what you're going to get. Okay, even if no error is found, journals will not publish because they are also worried about their credibility. They won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So they're going to say, like when I gave my new model of induction to a lot of journals out there, they said, oh, we don't publish this sort of stuff. Okay, fine. Lastly, there's no money in it. No one gives you grant money for proving something wrong. And most of the time when you find a counterexample, it's because you're working in a grant to prove something true. So if in that money you've actually proved something wrong, well, that's kind of your misuse of funds, isn't it? So you're going to probably have a problem with that. There's no Nobel Prize for proving theories wrong. And the worst part of this whole thing is that your counterexample to a widely held belief threatens the grants and funding of your colleagues. You should expect to be threatened. And let me show you a real example right now of this.
I believe that many of you heard of me first because I was criticizing particle physicists' plans for a bigger collider, among other places, in the New York Times. Here are some of the reaction from particle physicists. Seriously, fuck you. This person does not need this kind of soapbox. I find your comments respectless. It would be a good idea for you to leave basic research. You do not have the spirit needed. It is one thing to no longer be able or want to continue to do physics research, quite another to foul one's own eggs nest in public. If you were wondering why there are so few physicists who draw attention to the problems with their own discipline, this illustrates the problem. Physicists are not exactly welcoming of criticism. But I didn't just wake up one day and decided to crap on particle physicists. I swear it's not what happened. I'd spent the previous 15 years trying to understand why the foundations of physics stopped making progress in the 1980s. I believed then, and I still believe today, that I know why.
Okay, I will put a link to this in the description so that you can watch it again on your own. If you're on Patreon, I'm going to put a separate link for you because I won't put the link on the Patreon, but on the YouTube release, this will have that link in the low bar. Okay, so like Sabine has said, you will shut the flock up if you want to keep your income, your job, your prestige. And this is one of the reasons why I say that outsiders have the best chance, because they are not under the thumbs of the other leading experts. The Wright brothers are complete outsiders. Oh, and they didn't go to college. Faraday was also an outsider, and he didn't go to college. The guy who invented the wheel certainly didn't go to college. I wouldn't be surprised if they burnt him at the stake for witchcraft, though. And Einstein was an outsider because his marks, his grades in college were so poor that they wouldn't allow him into the halls of physics, so he had to go work at the patent office while he was developing his theory. And that might have been a good thing because he had no one there just going to do academic theft on him, and he would just keep submitting to the journals until they finally published one of his things. And so, and that's why, because he was at the patent office, he didn't have to worry about his income. And that's why when I started this, I changed my job from being an electrical engineer to a software engineer, because nobody is going to fire a software engineer for complaining that Maxwell's equations are gibberish. Now let's talk about human gullibility and things about fantasticisms and strangeness. Remember the example, now again, I'm going to put this video in the low bar in the YouTube link, that when I was a kid, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World and In Search of covered these sailing stones of Death Valley, and no one understood how the stones are moving, and they brought all the leading experts on, and you had all these fantasticisms about ley lines and electromagnetic vortices and all kinds of ridiculous nonsense, overly sensationalized bullshit, kind of like what you see on a quantum mechanics video, actually. And then when they finally found out actually how they worked 99 years later, there was a facepalm of how simple it was. It was pretty much just you had a rainstorm, and the top of the puddle that formed in the valley there would form an ice crust about, an eighth of an inch thick, and it acted like a big sail, and that's how all the stones, the wind would blow that big sheet of ice down like a big sail. And that's why all the stones moved together, because they're all stuck in a big sheet of ice. And that's because the mud was wet on the bottom and you had a layer of ice on the top. It all made perfect sense, and scientists are facepalming how simple the answer was. And that is what I am seeing in science, that the answers of the universe have to be ridiculously simple, and that we're over-exaggerating how complex they are. Because you look at these quantum experiment that defies logic exactly 1/12 of the time. That seems pretty assertive for something that defies logic. But in other words, just saying it defies logic, they don't understand it. The strangeness of quantum physics video. Oh my God, they're talking about strangeness. And then you have these guys. Now, these videos are like of the same, these are like machine-produced videos. I don't know, but these aren't far off from what physicists are producing. But I think these are more, I'm not going to use a word, but basically, terrifying warning has made a godlike discovery. And quantum computers may have accidentally activated the axion particle. I mean, come on. So be aware of the enchantment trap. That's why when you see graduations, the professors all dress up in wizard outfits. I don't know why we still do that. Why isn't a business suit, something that you wear to grad? Why do we have to have wizard outfits and cap and gowns and mortarboards? And it's all pageantry. That's all it is pageantry. Okay, so people get enchanted by pageantry and fantasticisms and complexities and other facades. Okay, these are the tools of the fraudsters. If they claim something is too strange for humans to understand, it's because they are frauds, or they don't know what they're doing. The truth should be simple and mundane, and this is going to be covered in the next, well, not in the next video, but in the 31st rule of acquisition, which is right after this one. Now we're going to talk about human bias and preference infiltrating science. See, one of the problems is you have these scientists that spend their whole lives researching one thing, and they've got degrees and awards, and they got books upon books, and they have publications and papers and instruments that all basically corroborate what they've done. And again, first rule of acquisition, just because you get the right answer doesn't mean your theory is true. And of course, you could have multiple different theories, very wildly different theories, and we demonstrated it in the earlier videos. You can get multi-theories. That's what we call polytheism. There can be multiple theories out there that give exactly correct answers. And I showed that with the Paradox 1 experiment in the earlier video. And the problem is these people invest time in this. And because of that, It's hard for them to give it up. Just like you get these relationships where people have been in a relationship for 10 years and a relationship falls apart, but then, oh my God, we have 10 years. We want to try to say we have so much invested. And so they will go through misery to try to keep the relationship going because of all the investment they have in it. Okay, and this is why, and because our human understanding of the universe is only a tiny little footprint. This actually would be microscopic if it were to scale of the real universe. And the universe is only a small footprint inside the mathiverse. And because of that, we should expect multiple mathematical models that will give exact, accurate answers to the limited knowledge we have in our current footprint. Only when our footprint expands will some of these bubbles burst and start becoming reduced as the counterexamples to them are uncovered. This concept was demonstrated in the earlier videos. And since there may be virtually infinite models that will explain the tiny amount that we presently know, this tiny little footprint, without a counterexample, because remember, sometimes we have to expand the footprint to find the counterexamples, we should not expect that anything that we know is true, and then we should not hold on to models too long. And that's why the 28th rule of acquisition, don't become invested in anything you can't walk away from in 30 seconds. And this is a modified quote from the movie Heat. And this is called the investment trap. Don't get trapped because you put a lot of time and effort into something. And then it gives you good answers. Good answers mean nothing because you can get good answers from fantasy. And who's to say that your theory isn't the fantasy? Ooh, I like that. I could add that. And a little thing from Mark Twain, don't let schooling interfere with your education. So what did we learn in this video? Progress results from proving the leading experts wrong, at least to everyone else, or waiting for them to die. Leading experts are wrong about everything, otherwise we'd have a theory of everything by now. Leading experts should be viewed as a hindrance to progress, even by leading experts. Popularity is not proof. The belief that someone should have said something by now is the reason no one says anything ever. Do not become enchanted with fantasticisms, pageantry, complexities, costumes, or other facades. These are the tools of fraudsters. If they claim something is too strange for humans to understand, it's because they are frauds. The truth should be simple and mundane, and that will be more demonstrated in Rule of Acquisition 31. And don't become invested in anything you can't walk away from in 30 seconds. The best way to support this is on the Patreon site. And you will see videos for technology videos, at least a month earlier than they will be published on YouTube. And in many cases, a lot of the videos I produce to the Patreon are never released to the public. This is the repository. If you go to the intro video, the YouTube site, I'll explain how to navigate this to find everything, to find the papers. This is the YouTube site. Again, the intro video to this explains how to navigate the repository. All of the different books of ethereal mechanics are in different playlists. Transvariance, electrogravity. I think we have to reproduce Vortrix algebra. Rules of acquisition is a separate playlist as it's being developed. I'm going to change the logo to truth. And the cosmology stuff is upcoming. New electromagnetism V5 is there, but there's going to be addendums to new electromagnetism V5. This is the blog site. The difference here is it's .info. Big shout out to Sebastian for supporting this. Again, if I can get enough Patreon members that I can do this full time, I will have the time to spend more time interacting with people here. I'm sorry, I don't spend almost no time on this, and I apologize for that right now, but I just have so limited time. And no more voodoo physics. And the reason why I call it voodoo physics is because Mr. Einstein here has predicted time dilation and length contraction, but there's no mechanism by which they cause length contraction or time dilation. They're just inferred properties that must happen, but there's no mechanism. And so just like voodoo, where there's no mechanism, if you put a pin in a voodoo doll that somebody dies of a heart attack, there's no mechanism. That's why I call it voodoo physics. We have to show mechanism. The rules of acquisition require a mechanism. Otherwise, your science is voodoo. So thank you very much.